Pro-life talk. Real world answers. This is Life Report.
Welcome to Life Report. I'm your host, Josh Brahm. We're here with a really special guest, Brad Mattis from Life Issues Institute. And I'm just going to read a little bit of your bio so everyone gets an idea of who you are. And then I've got a lot of questions for you, Brad. Brad Mattis is a two-time Emmy Award. He wins Emmys doing pro-life work. This is the only time this happens. He's won 2 Emmys. Third nomination coming up in the next couple of weeks. Emmy Award-winning host and executive producer of Facing Life Head-On, which airs in over 100 million homes in the United States and Canada. He's an internationally acclaimed presenter with a genuine interest in and compassion for people. Brad is also serves as executive director and co-founder of Life Issues Institute, an educational organization globally headquartered in Cincinnati, Ohio. In addition, Brad hosts Life Issues, a daily radio commentary broadcast on over 1,100 radio outlets throughout the United States. An adjunct professor at Masters International School of Divinity, Brad has a master's degree in biblical studies and biblical counseling. Brad, tell me how you got involved in the pro-life movement.
Ooh, it dates back to the Stone Age almost. When I was a senior in high school in 1975, 2 years after Rome, I went to my local high school in Billings, Montana. And I was in a persuasive speech class, and I chose abortion for my speech. So I looked up Right to Life in the yellow pages and went to the local Right to Life group, and a lovely lady by the name of Mary Rose gave me what she called the Wilke handbook and the Wilke slides and literature. Wow. I took a poll before doing the speech, and it was about 50-50 for and against abortion. I did the presentation using the Wilke educational information, took the poll afterward, and it was unanimous for life.
Wow.
So I learned early on that education is at the heart of pro-life victories in legislation and political endeavors.
Talk a little bit about Dr. Wilke. I hear him called the grandfather of the pro-life movement, and as you're telling that story, I'm like, okay, 1975, and he already had slides out, and he had all this educational material out. How early was he putting out this educational information?
Well, they were doing things like literature and whatnot in about 1970 is when they started producing those things. They were trying to legalize abortion in Michigan, and Colorado, New York, other places. So they were quite active in working to stop abortion by the time Roe versus Wade came along.
Wow. So tell me about how the pro-life movement, how you see the pro-life movement as having changed in the last 30 or 40 years, especially as it relates to media, because more than just about anybody else, and probably earlier than just about anybody else, you guys were doing stuff with media, with TV, with radio, and social media. I know you're also doing educational, like kind of more traditional educational things, but tell me why Life Issues kind of cared so early on about using multimedia, where a lot of people probably thought, that's kind of, let's just keep on doing kind of the old way.
Yeah, well, education has always been the heartblood of Dr. Wilke and his wife, who died recently. And that's why we started the Institute, because we saw fewer and fewer pro-lifers concentrating on the educational aspects, and everything collapses without that. So I remember back when we got our first 16 millimeter film to show people, and it was this huge disc. We hauled around projectors and everything and set them up and showed them in homes and schools. VHS came in, and we thought, boy, that's miraculous. And now we have the internet, which is so incredible. So anybody can be an effective pro-life activist for cheap.
Right.
Because you can produce your own stuff, you can get it out. Our radio program, we record on a digital line here in our studio with our Southern California production company.
Oh, wow.
Within an hour or two at the most, I can have an urgent message to all 1,100 radio stations throughout the United States with that technology that we have. So it's been something the Wilkes always, and I so enjoyed this about them, they were never ones to stick in a rut. And when they saw that the pro-life movement had to change to keep up with the times, they did that. And I've learned from them, working with them over the years, and we are taking their legacy and making sure that it continues with this new technology.
That's awesome. I'm going to ask you about your TV show in a minute, but first, I know you're really passionate about abortion and how it affects men. Can you just talk to us a little bit about that and what you've learned about that? No one talks about this issue. Everyone talks about how abortion affects women. Almost no one is talking about men.
Well, many people ask if I personally have had an experience with abortion, and I haven't. But I just feel it's been placed on my heart to stand up for these guys. I really hate the fact that nobody's there advocating for them. You know, we began to get letters and emails from hurting fathers, and I told Dr. Wilke that, you know, we're missing the boat here. There's something underneath the surface that we're not aware of. So I did my own anecdotal research, and the more I realized that this is a huge problem. The prisons across America are loaded with guys who have abortions in their past.
Wow.
And anger is a consistent problem for men dealing with abortion. So I was a founding member of the Men in Abortion Network, and we're about 12, I guess you'd consider us experts in the field, from peer counselors to highly credentialed counselors.
Wow.
And we provide awareness, and we also provide counseling. A guy can anonymously email us, just give us the town in which he resides, and we can provide a free counselor for him. We even did so in Fairbanks, Alaska. So
that's amazing. So how can people find out about that? What's the website for that?
they can go to lifeissues.org,
Okay.
Look on the pull-down menu and click on Men and Abortion. There's a wealth of resources right there.
Why don't you tell us just a little bit just about the other resources that are at that website? I know you guys have done a lot of traditional publishing for a very long time. So just tell us a little bit about what people can find at the Life Issues website.
Well, we do a wide variety of research and dissemination of information, from things to cloning to euthanasia. One of the key projects, though, is our urban outreach project, where we have people that of color who go into the Black community and educate them to the fact that the abortion industry is targeting them for abortion. We just completed some new research that shows in a very dramatic visual way that 79% of Planned Parenthood surgical abortion facilities are located within walking distance of Black neighborhoods and Hispanic neighborhoods.
So tell us about Facing Life Head On. There's not that many pro-life groups with a TV show, especially a TV show like yours.
Well, this week we were informed that we had 2 Emmy nominations.
Yay.
This makes a total of 6 nominations, and we've received 2 awards so far. Hopefully on July 20th, we'll find out that we've garnered another one, God willing.
Wow, I hope so.
I wanted to reach more people with the pro-life message, unfiltered by the liberal media and Hollywood, and we decided to do quality production. I didn't want to do it if we couldn't do it well, because it would reflect poorly on the movement and the babies.
Good for you.
So we pulled the resources together, and we do 22 half-hour programs a year, and we're just begun our 7th season. In February, the crew and I traveled to Ethiopia and did our first international episodes. We were hoping to do 2 programs and came back with content for 4.
Wow.
So those are airing now, and you know, we just don't have a lack of topics to cover or guests to interview. And what I like to do is facilitate these guests, let them tell their stories of decisions, good or bad, and the ramifications of them. And then we often combine that heart-tugging story with an expert in that field.
And so just tell us about some of the common themes. If someone watches this show regularly, what are some of the common things that they're going to see on your show?
Well, we've talked about adoption. We've talked about people with Down syndrome and how valuable they are. We've done embryo adoption. We've done end-of-life issues, euthanasia, you know, everything in between. It's just a myriad of issues, breast cancer and abortion. The list is long, so if it's involved with the life issues, we're covering it.
So that brings me to my next question, because when I put out on Facebook, as I usually do when we're going to interview someone, hey, do you have any questions you'd like to ask this person? Let us just be the conduit. One of the first questions was from someone who said, how do you get Emmy nominations doing pro-life work? So what's your answer to that, Brad? How does this amazing thing happen?
Well, content and quality are king. And if you have good quality and content, it will be rewarded. And the judges are your peers in the industry. And when they see quality, you know, they understand it. We did also submit programs that weren't really in your face.
Right.
But that's not the style of the program anyway. We're not overtly religious. We let them tell their story. We don't have to say abortion's bad. Their experience and their stories communicate that in a way that those that aren't necessarily with us on abortion can accept and be persuaded.
So what were you hoping to accomplish by going to Ethiopia?
Well, of course, we wanted to do an international program, but they're in a society, and I don't know if you've been to Africa.
No.
It's one of my favorite continents, and I love the people there. I wanted to show our viewers that there are societies and cultures that face such poverty and troubles that would put us to shame. That we saw levels of poverty we've never seen before, and yet these people are happy and content with life. And we visualize them struggling with the life issues on both ends. Young girls with unplanned pregnancies, unmarried, who are shunned in society, facing the most difficult trials in their lives to give their babies life. And then the same on the other end. I talked to about 8 poor widows, most of whom had to go to the local dump to get their food, and how a Christian organization is sponsoring them. And we talked about their outlook on life and the value of life. So it's pretty dramatic stuff, and it shows us Americans that, you know, we have it much better, so we should choose life also.
Yeah, and maybe have a different attitude about life in general and the things that we whine about. Tell us about the abortion worker that you spoke to while you were over there.
We did a program on this maternity home that was set up by Americans. Actually, it was Dinah and Mike Monahan, who own Heritage House 76 for 10 people. And we went over there with Dinah, and we interviewed several girls, some pregnant, some with babies, and told their story. We also interviewed anonymously. We shadowed his identity, somebody who worked at the local abortion mill in the hospital of the abortion area, and he was secretly funneling girls to the maternity home.
Wow.
And he's pro-life, and he struggles with where he is and what he's doing, but he's also saving lives by sending girls to the maternity home. Because just imagine, they're facing an unexpected pregnancy. They've been tossed literally out on the street. There's no governmental agencies to help them. So, of course, they're going to choose abortion. And then for that lifeline to be out there is miraculous. They find it hard to believe. It takes them a couple days of being at the maternity home before they actually believe that they're really real, that these people are really going to offer what they say they will.
One of the most emotional parts of this episode was you talking to this bedridden woman who suffered from leprosy. Will you just tell our audience a little bit about that?
Yeah, she was well into her 80s. She had been bedridden for 18, 19 years. She had fallen and broken her hip, and of course, poor people have no medical care whatsoever.
Right.
So she was bedridden. Leprosy had eaten all of her fingers away, so she just had stubs for hands. And as I sat by her bedside in this filthy little room with a dirt floor and held her stubby hands, and I said, well, what is your greatest need now? And she smiled and said, I have Jesus, and I have food, a place to lay down. I have everything I need. And we looked at each other, the crew and I, and we just hardly believed what we were hearing.
So you had this amazing experience. You talked to these people that just were so inspiring. How has your life changed since you returned? How long have you been back from Ethiopia?
Been about 3 months or so. We spent 2 weeks over there. As president of the International Right to Life Federation, I've done quite a bit of traveling and been exposed to cultures like this. But it still had a huge impact, especially with a crew who had never been there before. And one with young children said life's going to be different in his household from there on out, because he's going to show the kids what life is like in other cultures. We realized that we don't need things to make us happy or content. And actually, they work against being content and happy. These people with nothing were the most happy, contented people that I've ever met.
So do you think differently about abortion now after having that experience, or has any of that changed for you?
Well, it shows us dramatically why women choose abortion, because there was virtually no reason for them to choose life in that society and those conditions they're in. So it's really a God thing that people were placed in that way to help them. Otherwise, it's almost impossible for them to choose life for their babies. And there's economic considerations around the world that are very similar. In America, to much less degree, but some of those cases are the same, where they don't feel they'll have enough resources to take care of a family. So we have to show them in love, reach out to them and show them that we'll help carry that burden, and we'll get you the resources you need and help you through.
Got a question for you from Rich in Atlanta. He asks, what was the most difficult interview that you've done for your show, Facing Life Head On? What made it difficult? And also, what tips do you have for people who find themselves in a position where they are called on to interview someone in the news?
Okay. Well, the most difficult interviews by far for me were the programs we did last year that gave us our last Emmy. It was called A Lifetime Sacrifice, and we tied in the theme of soldiers in Afghanistan and Iraq defending our most basic rights, including the right to life. So I interviewed family members and a soldier in various levels of sacrifice. And I talked to a 20-something widow whose husband had been killed in Afghanistan. 4 days after he returned to Afghanistan from a 2-week R&R, he was blown up with 4 of his other guys by an IED. 4 days after that, she found out she was pregnant. Wow. The child was born and looked just like Dad, except for the color of his hair. And I talked to a woman whose son was killed in Iraq on her birthday. And I talked to a nurse whose son had been horribly injured. It was a miraculous thing that he survived, and I talked to him and his mother. Talking to these people who have sacrificed so much was really, really difficult thing to do. We deal with a lot of emotion, and there's a lot of tears in these interviews, and the hardest thing, I think, is to keep your composure during those times. But as having a son who was in Iraq for a year and being passionately patriotic, those were the most difficult interviews I've ever done. But I would say, as far as tips, my goal is to stay out of the way. Just facilitate the conversation. So I get the questions started and let them talk. And of course, we have the benefit of editing out the best parts. But I always take the point of view that I'm not the star.
Right.
These guests are, and I'm just like the cameraman or somebody who's facilitating their message and their story, which is very compelling.
I know this is tricky after you've done over 100 episodes, but do you have a few favorites as you kind of look back over everything you've filmed, a few favorite episodes or a few favorite guests?
Yeah, and I would say our patriotic one was my all-time favorite, based mostly upon the emotion and my passionate patriotism. But I also love the programs when we deal with individuals with Down syndrome. That is an issue near and dear to my heart, and I love interacting with them. We're in post-production work right now on a program on Gigi's Playhouse, which a mother of a child with Down syndrome is establishing these places all over America where people can go for therapy and a network and a neighborhood, a community of other parents who have children with Down syndrome.
Wow.
I just love those programs.
All right, I've got a few more listener questions for you. Consuelo from Fresno asks, this is a big question, Brad, how do we ban abortion? How do we overturn Roe versus Wade?
Well, we be persistent. It's taken over 40 years so far, but we also take lessons from history. And those who worked to abolish slavery had to hang with it. And you gain ground little by little. We have to change the conscience of a nation. And in our line of work, we think education is key to do that. But the other aspects of politics and legislation are very important too. And if you change laws, I think the behavior and hearts of man will follow. But we have to be windows to the womb and show people what's happening. Ultrasound has been a huge tool for us and a big help. So it's everybody working at different angles with minorities, nurses for life, priests for life, us, working to elect candidates. We all work together and complement everybody where we can, and that's how we're going to do it. That and a lot of prayer, of course.
Yeah, and we know we're not going to overturn Roe in the next probably couple of years, and so we're looking at a marathon, not a sprint. Looking ahead at the next, let's say, 10 years, what is it you think that'll be really important for the pro-life movement to either continue doing or start doing, or change if we have to kind of continue adapting?
Well, I think one of the things we have to do that we're not doing really great is we have to continue with the basics. The basic information that those of us who have been in the movement for a while learned that got us so excited about battling abortion. We need to make sure that every generation coming up has those basics, and that the young people in the movement know what the history is of the movement, so that they can learn and build on that. But people who have never been exposed to the abortion issue needs to hear that at 18 to 28 days, a heart is beating of the unborn child with a blood different from that of the mother's. That brain waves can be recorded, that at 10 weeks, toes and fingers are formed. We need to keep doing that, and of course, work very hard.
Okay, I've got one last question for you, Brad. Nick from Carbondale, Illinois asks, is there anti-intellectualism in the pro-life movement? And if so, how do we combat it? And I asked him to explain what he meant by that. So this is a little bit of him explaining his question. He says, there is a stereotype that pro-lifers, along with other types of conservatives, are anti-intellectual, which is obviously not totally true. He said, your podcast, but then there's also LTI and First Things and et cetera. However, he said, I wonder if the mainstream rank and file pro-lifer knows the right arguments for unborn rights. More importantly, I wonder if pro-life politicians know the right arguments, and we could both list a couple of examples where they clearly did not. I wonder if this is a result of the typical skepticism conservatives sometimes have towards Harvard-educated elites.
I'm really glad he asked that question because the media have added to this perception that we're a bunch of flat earth Neanderthals. And one of the things that we always intended to do was do things with excellence, incorporating research and information, working on a level of academia that matches that demand and that exactness and detail, while at the same time you can take that and format it to a more grassroots basic audience. But there are a lot of people in the movement. We've seen the evolvement of the pro-life movement to a more professional academic level where it's needed. And it's there, but maybe you're not seeing it as much as you should be. Unfortunately, the media like to portray us pro-lifers in a very negative light. So they're going to go find the most radical, yelling people who don't articulate the issue very well. And those are the ones that unfortunately get a lot of the camera time or quotes in the paper.
Well, that's it for this episode of Life Report. Brad Mattis is the Executive Director of Life Issues Institute. You can check out their website and their TV show at lifeissues.org. Thanks for joining us today, Brad.
Thank you, Josh.
This is just part one of a two-part interview, so remember to come back in 2 weeks for the second part. If you want to comment on this episode, you can go to prolifepodcast.net/175. Scroll down through the show notes, leave us a comment or a question. We'd love to interact with you. Now remember, you can have an impact in any conversation if you remember to ask good questions, listen to understand, and find genuine common ground when possible. Have a great week.
You've been watching Life Report, pro-life talk, real-world answers. Life Report is produced by Right to Life of Central California. Visit their website at fresnoprolife.org.